Hello and welcome to this overview of the Decks of Beasts, Creature Card Codex, Codices, Kickstarter. I'm Joe Wetzel, the creator of the Kickstarter. This is a Kickstarter for creating these two new decks. One is going to be the fourth in the series of Deck of Beasts, with creatures from the Tome of Beasts book by Kobold Press. The other is going to be a combined deck, which is kind of the ninth deck in the series. It's the fifth kind of both the Decks of Beasts and the Tome of Beasts. So it's a combined deck with creatures from both of the books with the highest level creatures. What you see in front of you here is the checklist card, the cover card with the checklist on it of all the creatures in this particular deck. If you're curious about the creatures from the other decks, on our store at store.inkwellideas.com, you can get all of the checklists for the other decks. Generally, they go by challenge rating, with this deck being challenge rating 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Roughly in that area, although it's not a hard and fast rule. We try to group things together a little bit as we do the decks. For example, this has many of your demons and many of the devils and many of the dragons that are wormling, young, and adult, but not the ancient and not some of the adults. Let's see, with that, let me get into a little bit more of it. Here we've got one of the creatures. This is the first one in the deck. This one actually needed 2 cards. We have a handful of creatures that need 2 cards to get all the details in there. And we do all of the traits and actions, reactions, legendary actions. We don't include the regional and lair actions. Those are, kind of would add a whole nother card to those creatures, and so we kind of push that off. And that's something that you can jot down. Those generally aren't used too often. Those creatures aren't used too often. So hopefully that's minimal, but we kind of wanted to kind of keep the scope down a little bit, so we stuck to the traits, actions, reactions, and legendary actions. In this case here, we've got a creature that required only 1 card, and in fact this didn't have a lot of details, not a lot of detailed traits and actions, so we were able to use an 8-point font here, whereas in other cases we use 7.5 font to kind of get everything onto 1 card. Another trick that we use is we'll abbreviate some things like no material comps. We'll go to like a caveman English sometimes to drop articles, A's and thes out as needed. In other cases we'll leave it in if we don't need to cut things. But the full meaning is there. Let's see, the art is licensed from Kobold Press. You'll recognize the art from the books, but then we find backgrounds that we think are appropriate and put those in. Occasionally we commission new backgrounds. We'll tweak the backgrounds that kind of are part of the artwork from the book and kind of expand it to give it the full width of the card, for example. I know there's a case of that towards the end here with the phoenix, or the sphinx rather. So this here is something where in the book it kind of cuts off the background a little bit for this stone that he's on. So that gives you an idea of what we do with the artwork. In a couple of cases we actually commissioned some new artwork. So in this particular deck, I know the cave dragon, we were doing the cave dragon as an adult, and that took 2 cards to kind of span that, and we'll probably be expanding this description a little bit more. We kind of tried to compress it down to 1 card, and then we kind of gave up on that, kind of decided, okay, we're going to go to 2 cards. So we have a couple of lines here, and we'll probably expand that back out a little bit. But anyway, point being is related to the art is you've got 1 card here. We zoom in for the second card, kind of give you the more detail. But then in the same deck, we are going to do a young and the wormling as 2 more cards. So we decided to commission a new piece of artwork for that. Another case where we do some new artwork in this particular deck is the Zemi headling here. The Zemi, this is the art from the book, and when you chop off a head, it can become its own new creature if you don't, if you're not careful about that, if you don't take some preventative steps. So this here is artwork for that, since it wasn't in the book. There's a couple of other cases in the decks where we do that. Let's see. So the artwork, I do like having the backgrounds. I do think that improves the artwork to me. Also, just having it on the glossy cardstock improves the artwork. And another advantage, so this leads into the advantages of the cards, is you can actually clip the card to the top of your GM screen, and the players can see the artwork, and you've got the stats handy, and so it's kind of cool to see that. And in fact, I hadn't really thought of doing that until maybe the third deck or so, and Wolfgang had mentioned it as an idea, and I was like, oh yeah, that's pretty obvious. You can also track initiative that way too, though, because you can put them in order on the GM screen, and you can even put in little post-its or little cards for your players as well, and keep track of initiative that way. So that was kind of cool. What we're looking at here, I should point out, is the PDF. If you pledge at the $10 level, you get one PDF, and for $9 more, you can get an additional PDF. So if you wanted to pledge for three different decks PDFs, you could pledge. That would be $28. 10 plus 9 plus 9 would get you 3 decks, for example, as PDFs. When you get the PDF, you also get a second version of the PDF, which is laid out as 4 cards per page, where the fronts are one page and then the backs are the second page. So you can kind of print it out duplex, two-sided, and then cut them and make your own if you wish. Laminate them afterward if it might be the best way to go about that. Up here on the corners, you can see little lines. If you look closely, they're cut off down here on the bottom, but we've got these lines. This marks the bleed area. Outside of those lines is the bleed area, and that just makes it so that if your printer isn't set up to be perfectly in line both sides, if you cut based on the back's lines, then the front you have a little bit of extra printed area, so that it will still look appropriate. You have an extra 1/8 inch of artwork, so when you print, you won't end up with blank paper or blank strips of page around your artwork. Let's see, other things I should go over. If you pledge for $20, that gets you 1 deck, and then it goes up from there for each additional deck. We've got different pledge levels. We build in a bit of a discount as you pledge for multiple decks, which kind of factors in. We've built into the price of shipping into our pledge levels within the U.S. And so we kind of pass that on to you as you order multiple decks. For international shipping, we've also kind of built in some savings there as well to do what we can to help with international shipping. However, I should say, if you are in the UK or Europe, I think your best bet, since we'll be setting these up through DriveThruRPG, your best bet may be to pledge that for the PDFs, and then you'll get codes to get them printed on demand for about $8 or so per deck, and that might be a better way, is to lower the shipping costs for yourself as well as to help with VAT and that sort of thing. Let's see. So again, let me kind of sum this up. We've got the 2 new decks, this 4th deck of Beasts, as well as that 5th combined deck, the 9th overall, if you will, which combines the highest level, the epic creatures from the 2 books. And then we've got the stretch goal that we hit already for the 30 new NPC cards. I think there's 29 NPCs, and I think 1 or 2 require a second card, so you end up getting a little over 30 once you factor in also the cover card and a checklist, a cover and a license cover checklist card and a license card. But 29 NPCs is what I remember there being. So I think that covers this. I'll post another checklist for that 5th deck as well as the NPC deck as other updates. But again, I just want to close with thanks for your interest in the Kickstarter.